Hey everyone, this is Mike, and today is going to be about Ninja. The video is a little bit overdue because people had been asking about my thoughts on the Raizu changes way back at the start of Endwalker, because Endwalker Ninja didn't really launch in that amazing of a state, but that got adjusted in the Savage patch, I believe it was, so it's a lot better now. And then we also got some extra adjustments in our current patch 6.1 that I don't think anyone saw coming really, although I can see why they decided to change what they changed. So let's start with the earlier changes first. Fleeting and Forked Raiju were a major pain point for Ninja for two reasons. Both skills were gap closers, and both skills needed to be used back to back following a write-on. This could lead to you doing 6 gap closers in a row in the opener, and while this sometimes wasn't an issue, there are occasions where you can keep melee uptime, but where you can't be as close to the boss as where a gap closer would take you. Another issue is that this made your Huton uptime a lot more tricky as well, because they made the timer on Huton shorter, and now you have to do so many GCDs in a row that don't extend the duration. So it wasn't all that great. What then changed is that they made Forked and Fleeting Raiju no longer combo into each other, but they are a choice now. One is a gap closer and the other is a normal melee GCD, and using either of them would consume 1 stack of Raiju ready. So this fixed both problems. You're no longer using 6 GCDs back to back, it's only 3 now, and you also get to choose if you want a gap closer or not, so much better. To help with the Huton uptime some more, they also changed Phantom Kamaitachi. When using Bunshin, you now get a buff that lasts for 45 seconds, during which you can use Phantom Kamaitachi. Again, this helps with your Huton, because it does extend Huton by 10 seconds I believe, and this also helps with your uptime, as this is now your preferred ranged skill to use to keep uptime when you have to disengage from a boss. Otherwise, you'd need to use a write-on, and that meant missing out on a write-on and Raiju usage underneath your trick attack or other buff windows. So those are the old changes, and I'm a fan of both of them. Let's then go into the new stuff. Now, I'm not really going to talk about number changes. If you want to know how Ninja is doing, then, well, all I can say is that it's doing very well. Looking at these statistics, Ninja is currently one of the best performing DPS classes in the game, so it's doing quite well for itself. So what changed? Well, the first thing they did was make it so that Doton disappears when you use Hide. Might seem like a bit of a random change to some, but something that you could do to get that little bit of extra DPS was drop a Doton before pulling the boss and then have your tank drag the boss into your Doton. With this change, that's no longer going to be the case, and I personally don't really care about this one being gone, to be honest. The biggest change, however, that changes quite literally everything and nothing at the same time is Trick Attack and Mug. The reason why I say this changes nothing is because your rotation is still going to be the same. The reason why I say it changes everything is because we've now lost our last 1 minute raid buff. So what happened is that Trick Attack is now a personal damage buff, and the party damage buff is now coming from Mug, so they turned it into a 2-minute raid buff. Numbers wise, this means that Ninja will deal more damage themselves and provide less damage to your party members, but as I mentioned before, the raid DPS contribution is amongst the highest right now, so if they don't tweak any numbers, then this was quite the raid DPS buff for Ninja. So while not much has changed for you personally in terms of your rotation, because you're still going to use Trick Attack where you used to, and you'll also still use Mug in almost the exact same places as before as well, it does change a lot for the rest of your team, because most jobs play around a 1 minute burst window. Even if their big burst is around the 2-minute mark where your raid buffs are, a lot of jobs still had something to use at the 1 minute mark, and when learning to optimize your play, you would always learn how to optimize that 1 minute window in case you would ever have a ninja on your team. However, with this change, a lot of that optimization is no longer needed. Sure, there are still some jobs that will have their own 1 minute burst buff, Gunbreaker and Monk, just to give an example, but you no longer have to put that little extra towards that burst if you're a job that doesn't have a damage buff. Monk, for example, has Riddle of Fire, so they'll still play exactly the same as before, but something like a Samurai, for example, while having a 1 minute burst window, where they have to reapply their Higambana and where they have their Midare with Meiko Shisui, they don't have to do anything extra for it. They just need to do their Higambana and Midare, and that's it. They don't need to save Kenki to squeeze in some Shintens, because there's no trick attack to play around anymore. And the same thing goes for Machinist. They would save battery gauge for their Queen as well as some Gauss rounds and ricochets. And while the Queen will probably not change, as that is something that needs to stay aligned for the 2-minute burst window, they no longer have to care about saving Gauss rounds and ricochets. Because the only time where you would care to save for a 1-minute burst if you have an Astrologian in the party. But then the only person that needs to care about that is the one that will be getting the card. So it's quite a big change in the raiding environment. I know that this doesn't affect the majority of the player base, it only really affects those who optimize their job around raid buffs, but I also know that there is a portion of the player base that really enjoys pushing their jobs to the limit, and now a big part of that is gone. And this also lowers the skill ceiling for a lot of jobs as well. What I can say though is that this wasn't as surprising. When we look at all of the other jobs in the game, all raid buffs are now 2 minutes. Bard and Dragoon went from 3 to 2 minutes. Monk went from 90 seconds to 2 minutes. And there's some others as well, but I'm not going to be mentioning every single job that had this change. So this already happened at the launch of Endwalker, and if anything, it was more surprising that Ninja still kept its 1-minute raid buff, instead of them also getting the same treatment as literally every other job in the game, but now that time has finally come. I personally enjoyed the old raid buff timers where you would have different raid buffs at different points in time, and then over the course of a fight everything would align back again at that 6-minute mark. So the 6-minute reopener was always a lot more exciting and something to look forward to, whereas right now everything happens every 2 minutes, except potions. Those will still hit the opener in the 6-minute buffs, but it's quite different compared to before. So that's kind of everything that I wanted to talk about. Half ninja changes, half raid buff optimization talk, I guess, but it is something that I did want to include in the video. So let me know what you think of the changes to both ninja and the raid buff stuff. Do you like that everything is getting streamlined, or did you prefer the old way of how our raid buff windows used to work? Let me know down below. And with that, I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my Patreons for their support, and I'll see you in the next one.